The following video contains mentions of sexual assault, violence, war, torture, imprisonment, death, murder, and religious oppression. Viewer discretion is advised. All images, resources, sources, and audio will be linked down in the description. If you are a creator of a particular source of media and you don't approve of its use, please let me know. The Islamic or Iranian Revolution was a series of events that led to the Pahlavi dynasty being overthrown and the establishment of the Islamic Republic of Iran in 1979. On a historical level, revolutions happen for a plethora of reasons, but one common factor: change. Social, political, or economic change, sometimes for the better and sometimes for the worse. Before the Islamic Revolution, Iran lived under the monarchy of Shah Muhammad Reza Pahlavi, or simply Reza Shah, who implemented the White Revolution, a series of reforms made to modernize the country. Beginning on January 26, 1963, the hope had been to turn Iran into a global and economic power. Specifically, this included land reform, the eradication of disease, and women's rights, to name a few. And particularly, the Shah had been looking to establish working relationships between the Soviet Union and Eastern European nations. Another thing that sparked this severe opposition was the Savak, or Organization of National Security and Information. They were the secret police of the Imperial State of Iran, established in 1957 to protect the Shah's regime. At its peak, Savak had approximately 5,000 full-time agents. Some of their capabilities included censorship and screening applicants for government jobs. They used several forms of torture on those who disagreed. Of course, the Savak was dissolved after the 1979 Islamic Revolution. And soon after the revolution, it was Ayatollah Khomeini who led the Islamic Republic that Iran became, and was granted extensive authority based on Wilayat-e-Faqih, or governance of the jurist. Wilayat-e-Faqih means a qualified jurist, or faqih, should have guardianship over the Muslim community, which was the basis of the new Iranian constitution. The Iranian government began excluding former left-wing nationalists and intellectual allies from positions of power and enforced conservative social values. Today, we're going to discuss the graphic novel Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi, an Iranian woman who lived in Iran during and after the Islamic Revolution, to which this book provides a first-hand account of the experiences of someone in a society plagued by war. Persepolis tells Marjane's story through striking black and white illustrations, exploring the tragedy of war, political resistance, and the loss of innocence. Particularly, we're going to focus in on two themes. 1. The impact on women in Iranian society, and 2. Political, military, and police institutions. The book opens with 10-year-old Marjane Satrapi in 1980s Iran. Margie talks about how her school had been co-ed and for the most part was relatively liberal in how the students were made to act. But as a result of the revolution, the boys and girls are now separated, and the girls have to wear the hijab, or the veil as Marjane calls it, mandatory, designed to instill a sense of modesty in the young girls. To quote, "We didn't really like the veil, especially since we didn't understand why we had to." From a young age, the regime conditioned these young girls to be submissive and obedient to their country. All these mandated changes naturally angered Iranian citizens, and several protests or demonstrations broke out. Marjane's parents were avid protesters. It's not a major part of the story, but when a photo of Marjane's mom protesting begins circulating on news networks, she dyes her hair and masks her face with glasses for a very long time afterwards, showing the reader that while Iranian citizens may have been technically allowed to speak out, the social consequences were so fearsome that those who did often had to take extreme precaution to protect themselves. As a young child, Marjane was very spiritual and spoke to God every night about her conflictions regarding the revolution. Marjane wanted to fix what she deemed to be injustices, so she dreamed of becoming a prophet, a speaker of God. One of these injustices in particular was her grandmother's aching knees, the physical pain she wanted to take away from her. The regime often tried to dim the independence of their women and mainly used the Islamic religion to justify that. But as Marjane writes, "I wanted to be justice, love, and the wrath of God all in one." It shows you that for Marjane specifically, she valued her religion as a power that made her stronger, not as a force designed to push her down. She defied the rules that were placed on her by her country at a very young age. In fact, she decided to become a revolutionary later on, and begged her parents to let her go to demonstrations with them. Granted, this was after hearing that 400 people died in a local fire, and police stood outside, blocking those who wanted to help. Of course, her parents refused to let their young daughter go to protests, those of which became violent very quickly. To give you an illustration of just how bad the demonstrations could get, Marjie's parents protested against the Shah's government every day. They'd come home beaten and far too tired to engage with her. Marjane seemingly disagrees with her parents by saying, "I love the king, he was chosen by God." It's revealed that this thought isn't a conclusion that Marjane came to on her own, rather what her teacher told her. In fact, it's written on the first page of her school book. It's no secret that in war, or conflict in general, propaganda often influences citizens on what side they're meant to be on. At some point, you have to wonder when it stops being propaganda and starts being indoctrination, especially when it comes to the children of these conflicts. I'm a very big believer in, kids of the future, we should care how the next gen kids are being brought up, what media they're consuming, what influences are prevalent in their lives. You might hate Gen Alpha, but if one of these kids cures cancer, we're gonna have to start sucking up to them real quick. As I said before, it was one thing to be an activist of this time, but at some point you could only speak out for so long before you became an enemy of the regime. Marjane's maternal great-grandfather was the emperor who Reza Shah overthrew to become the new leader. However, the new Shah kept her great-grandfather as his prime minister, seeing as he was educated enough to help his regime succeed, but as soon as he began sharing communist views, he was drowned in a water-filled cell. It didn't take much to become an enemy of the regime. Marjane was lucky. She and her family were part of the upper middle class, which allowed her to get an education, though separated from her male peers and made to act and be a certain way as a girl. It was normal for the upper middle class of Iran to have help, and Marjie's family had their maid Mehri. Mehri fell in love with the neighbor's son, and the two of them actively exchanged love letters. And when I say they exchanged love letters, I mean Marjane wrote Mehri's letters for her, because Iranian women who weren't as well off financially were often illiterate. Like most peasants, she didn't know how to read or write. Yet another one of the disadvantages women had in Iran. As the citizens feel the tide shift, the Shah's regime coming to an end, people rejoice. But as Iran is making this shift from being under a Shah to having a democracy, everyone completely makes a switch. The same teacher who told Marjane that the Shah had been chosen by God now tells the students to rip out the Shah's picture from their books. And when Marjane rightfully points this out, she's told to stand in the corner as punishment. If you recall my brief mention of the Savak, or the secret police for the Shah, then you'll remember that before the revolution's end, they killed thousands upon thousands of people in the name of the Shah. And God. Marjane learns that her friend Ramin's father was a member of the Savak, and enraged, gathers some friends to attack him, but her mother stops her. She tells Marjane that it is not for me and you to do justice. We have to learn to forgive. Marjane finds Ramin and tells him that she forgives him, even though his father is a murderer. Ramin rejects her apology, saying that the people his father killed were communists, who are evil. Once again, another example of children regurgitating what their authority figures tell them. I imagine many of the personal beliefs we have were instilled in us by our parents or other authority figures. Treat others how you want to be treated. Some people are taught awful things, and in turn we get some pretty awful people in the world. Kids aren't born with prejudice, hate, or even a sense of justice. They gain those things from their environment. And when Ramin refuses to acknowledge that his father did anything wrong, it makes it clear to the audience that indoctrination, especially ideological indoctrination, is a dangerous force. In Chapter 7, The Heroes, we learn of the 3,000 political prisoners that are released after the Shah's falling. 2 out of these 3,000 are family friends of Marjane's family, Samak Jadi and Mohsen Shakiba. When Samak and Mohsen visit, they tell her and her family of the horrific torture they faced in prison. Marjane had been rightfully angry, brought to tears by what she heard. Marjane's mother tells her, "Bad people are dangerous, but forgiving them is too, and that there is justice on earth." Honestly, there's no way I could explain the descriptions of prison torture in the book. They were entirely unfiltered and brutal, with quite literal imagery as such. I'll elaborate more on this near the end, though. Along with Mohsen and Samak, we learn of another political prisoner close to Marjane's family, Anush, her father's brother, whose goal was to make all of Iran independent, one province at a time. But soon, things take a turn for the worst. Many of Marjane's friends and family begin to leave the country. Her parents consider leaving as well. Soon, they learn that Mohsen was found drowned in his bathtub, and it's clear whoever was responsible wanted him gone. On top of that, they learned that Samak's home was raided, and his sister was killed. Samak and his family escaped Iran by crossing the border. Not to mention, Anush has been placed back into prison. He can only get one visitor, and he chooses that visitor to be Marjane. In their visit, he calls her the daughter he's always wanted, and also assures her that the proletariat will rule. The proletariat will rule is a Marxist idea rooted in communist belief that the working class, or proletariat, will rise up against the ruling class, or the bourgeois. In the context of Persepolis, Anush was taken as a political prisoner for his communist views, and he hopes the revolution will create a better world for Iran. Anush is executed in prison, and Marjane loses faith in the God she once wanted to be a messenger for. In November of 1979, Islamic fundamentalists took over the U.S. Embassy in Tehran, and from there, the new Islamic Republic restricts even more harshly to guard against imperialist influences. Universities close, and women who don't wear veils now face the risk of being sent to prison, and men can't wear neckties, short-sleeve shirts, and are discouraged from shaving, except they don't face the risk of getting imprisoned for their fashion style. I guess when you're a man, no one can be aroused by your elbows the way a woman's can be. A group of fundamentalists threatened to brutally attack and rape Marjie's mom for her attire, and that if she didn't want it to happen, she should wear the veil. She returns home depressed, unable to move for several days. This shows you that even though both genders experienced these restrictions, the consequences for women were way more extreme. The fact that she was threatened with rape and violence exemplifies how the regime was enforced, both by the main authorities of the time and ideological fanatics. If you recall how people in Iran changed when the Shah was overthrown, then you should know that as the Islamic Republic began enforcing harsher restrictions on their people, the change of Iranian citizens became much more dramatic. Marjane's neighbors consisted of a wife who traded her miniskirts for a chador, and a husband who went from drinking every night to using mouthwash anytime he even says the word alcohol. This insane shift comes from the blood-curdling fear of being killed by the Islamic regime. People were so terrified that they made these dramatic shifts just to fit the standards placed on them. Society, or maybe just general scapegoats, tend to bend to every whim and will when terror becomes the main leader of your world as you know it. By the end of Chapter 10, things have gotten so extreme that Iran is now in war with Iraq. The Iraqi army conquered the city of Khorramshahr and had modern arms on their side, but where Iraq had quality, Iran had quantity, specifically a large population of young boys that could eventually become soldiers. And as these young boys die in battle, they get their pictures and names printed in the paper and are named martyrs. The Iranian army begins recruiting boys from poor neighborhoods by giving them plastic keys painted gold, telling them that they are keys to paradise. The key to paradise was for poor people. Thousands of young kids promised a better life, exploded on the minefields with their keys around their necks. Political, military, and police institutions can exploit vulnerable people for war. The reader gets a direct demonstration of how governments use propaganda and religion to justify sacrificing young lives for a cause. These young boys, who don't know any better, are led to believe that risking their lives and dying for Iran is a guaranteed ticket to heaven. And that is heartbreaking. I'll talk about the book from here to the end. Many simple pleasures become illegal, at one point in which Marjane steals a cigarette from her uncle and smokes it. This clear defiance of the rules symbolizing her transition from the child she was at the beginning of the book to the adult she is now. She's lost her innocence, and it's very clear to her that the regime is corrupt. Those who don't have passports cannot travel abroad, ergo, many Iranians cannot leave Iran. This is seen through Marjane's uncle, Taher, who needs open-heart surgery abroad and cannot go. They can't receive a passport in a timely manner due to the corruption and inefficiency of the bureaucracy. Taher dies before getting the passport, and it's cruel irony that the family does receive the passport on the day of his burial. There's also a strict ban on all things Western. Despite this, when Marjane's parents travel abroad, they buy her the Western things she asked them for and smuggle them through customs, such as denim jeans and a jean jacket. When she wears these things in public, she's stopped and threatened with arrest. She has to put on a whole act and ball just to get away with it, and it shows just how dangerous the simple act of self-expression was in this society. And finally, as Marjane becomes more and more defiant of the regime, she actively speaks out, leading to her expulsion at school, so her parents make the gut-wrenching decision of sending her away to Austria to continue her education, and she's only 14 at this time. The final few pages show Marjane leaving through the airport, and her mother passes out by grief. Overall, the book ends with Marjane leaving Iran. We've grown up with her as a character throughout the book, and it's clear that the cost of living under such an oppressive regime leads to an entire family being pulled apart to save one of their own from it. The ending leaves the reader with uncertainty. When I finished reading, I couldn't help but wonder if Marjane and her family would be okay. Throughout Persepolis, the theme of the impact on Iranian women is visibly seen through the harsh restrictions placed on their clothing, particularly in terms of the veil and how women acted at the time. Those who dared to defy these restrictions had to face threats of sexual assault and imprisonment, which, to me, tends to be a common thread in countries under conservative regimes. As for the theme of political, military, and police institutions, the regime was enforced, not just by the authorities, but by the manipulated Iranians who were taught to follow these rules without question. I talked about how indoctrination played a deep role in the war. Ramin, when it came to his father, the keys given to young boys who were told they were keys to heaven had they died in battle, and the inconsistent political lies fed to Iranian students. What Persepolis teaches us about war is that it's not just a matter of violence, it's the mass mental impact it makes on its citizens. The Iraq-Iran War ended in August 1998. From there, the economy was bankrupt due to war expenses, with the combined financial losses for Iraq and Iran being over $1 trillion. And the government continued to exclude those who didn't share the same views as them from positions of power. But there are some good things. Iran has since become Iraq's largest trading partner, with close alliances supporting each other against the Islamic State. You know, if that's not enemies to lovers, I don't know what is. Overall, though, Persepolis is controversial in nature. It's faced multiple ban attempts, one of which being successful in Chicago public schools, all because of this woman. Now, if you didn't know anything about this woman, you probably would have thought she was just a sweet old lady who likes making cookies for her grandkids. Well, you'd be wrong! Meet Barbara Byrd Bennett, the former CEO of Chicago Public Schools, and see, our darling friend Barb read Persepolis, and unlike me, who took away a profound message of what war can do to people and the youth particularly, Barbara thought it had graphic language and images that are not appropriate for general use. And yeah, I can see this book being disturbing. It does have some particularly off-putting visuals. But do you want to know why it has off-putting visuals? Because it's a book about war! Autobiographical! In fact, I am so sick of old people thinking they know what our generation needs. This is the same bunch of people that complains about Gen Z not reading enough. Gee, I don't know, maybe because you keep banning the books that matter. I mean, the book is about what indoctrination and banning elements of culture can do to people. I mean, why was an educator, whose job was to, educate, telling her students what to think about a book, no less? I'm going to tell you all something that my honors global teacher told me, that you should be willing to be disturbed. The fact is, war and tragedy are still prevalent things today. They haven't gone away. And yes, talking about these things is emotional and hard and uncomfortable, no doubt. But banning literature altogether, censorship, especially a book like this one, does a huge disservice to the thousands of people who lost their lives in these conflicts. So, if you're an educator and you're bored thinking, what book should I ban this time? Maybe don't. Just don't. But yeah, it's been your girl. Stay safe out there. Thanks for watching.